Hello everyone and welcome to our video presentation. I'm glad that you took the time to listen to this with me. Today we're going to be discussing a continuation of the concept I called scaling the realms. This is an addendum to the original video I published regarding this attempt to increase the security for the sharded Thorchain vaults. And this specifically is going to delve deeper into the actual solution proposed in terms of the actual specifics of the method to a certain degree, and most importantly, how the security of the shuffle is assured. And what we're maybe keeping in mind is the purpose behind this. We're looking to increase the economic security of the protocol against what I'm terming economic superiors. And we're going to do that by eliminating the minimum viable attack vector for collusion through scaling economic security, making the vault essentially Wall Street proof, if you could think of it in that way, at this stage of the scaling of the network and its liquidity pool vaults. Importantly, we're going to improve the bond distribution across the vaults in terms of equality of distribution, which will increase economic security as well. It's important to not disrupt the economics of the decentralized application or in any way the network function. And we're going to be looking for secure sources of entropy from the attributes of this method and Thorchain's function itself as a decentralized application. And when we're talking about scaling economic security, what relevance it is, and primarily what is actually the effect of the scaling of economic security, we're talking about the different strata of different levels of economic capability by potential attackers. And when you have a protocol for a decentralized application, the participants themselves, as being a part of the protocol, become secure against each other. And this is a fundamental principle in the development of growth of decentralized applications. They're all starting as open protocols available to be examined and potentially exploited out in the wild. So the way that their security begins is that the participants themselves can be assured that they're secure against attack from any of their peers on the network or anybody or any entity or organization that exists at the same economic level or the economic locality. And most importantly, what you want is you want that decentralized application protocol to also be secure against those in the strata immediately above the current economic locality of your protocol, such that they become interested in engaging in the protocol itself. When the protocol is not secure against the higher strata of attackers, they themselves know that in their participation with the protocol, they are not secure against their peers. And as their engagement then is not adding security to them, their own interests against their peers, they're more hesitant, not even considering, of course, those who might be hostile to the protocol. But when we elevate the economic security to include those who are the economic superiors, then they can know that their participation in the protocol is secure against their peers. And this is what creates a positively self-reinforcing feedback loop in the growth of economic security, as those who are of a higher economic capability lift the protocol up to their level, because obviously then if the protocol is secure against its economic superiors, they will be also secure not only against their peers in the meantime, but also as the protocol grows to be now at their economic strata, they will be secure against their superiors as well. And this will create a laddering effect or an upward spiral effect or a flywheel effect, depending upon how you look at it, that's going to encourage significantly the growth of the economic security as it begins to feed back on into itself. So this is really the principle behind this endeavor, is to how to elevate the security of the sharded vaults to include those who are of a higher economic strata. And we'll go in a little bit to the shuffle itself, but we're adding a non-trivial shuffle to the vault sequence. This means that we're not just taking a random selection. It's not purely random. There's a subset of randomization across the range of the nodes who are going to still be ordered by bond. So we maintain the distribution of bond across the whole validator set and therefore between the groups. It's also known as a challenge, of course, to do this without having participants try to gain rewards through this methods. But most importantly, we want to provide no economic advantage, which it does not. There's no advantage in the protocol to being in any group or not. And this is going to increase above and beyond the existing security of the bonding of the vaults. And we're looking to create from our source of entropy into generating this shovel a secure and balanced source of entropy such that no single control of any single source cannot solve for any shuffle sequence. The lack of control of any single source thwarts control of other sources, and there are sources of entropy which are non-manipulatable or non-controllable to the degree that you could with any certainty guarantee the outcome. And this guarantees what we could call pseudo-randomness, I think is the appropriate term here. Obviously, there's many ways in which we can use information that are available to the state machine at the time of the vault sequence generator, and we will be looking at many different ways that we could balance and tune this. And this is, of course, approximations at this point and able to be attuned further, but we have plenty of capability for ourselves to improve upon this in various different means if we need to, in various different ways. The shuffle method itself is pretty straightforward. We are taking the nodes as ordered by bond, as I said, and then shuffling them every n number of nodes or n number of positions in the bond ordering, where that is the number of vaults. And we are using standard cryptographic hashing of the sources of information and data available to the state machine. And it's important that we have enough possibilities and also a method that cannot be reverse engineered or in any way cannot be fully predicted. A very simple representation of it visually is, of course, we are taking several different sources of information. We are using asymmetric encryption algorithms to generate a hash. We then take that hash, and with our shuffle algorithm, we are able to create a vault sequence. So this is very easy to understand, and of course it all comes down to what is the seed that goes into the asymmetric encryption algorithm and what the sources of information are for that seed. And we can look at how these group assignments would then work, as they are both now with standard linear assignment and also with our pseudo-random assignment. If the nodes are ordered A to Z by bond, we can see that in standard linear assignment we know, of course, which nodes will end up in which groups. With the pseudo-random assignment, not knowing beforehand, there is a randomization that occurs which eliminates any kind of prediction as to being able to determine which nodes are going to be in which vaults. Important we understand that as an attacker coordinating to get your nodes into the vaults. With a standard linear assignment, you merely position your nodes according to bond as they would need to be in order to be put into the same group, which will be a simple repeating pattern. With the pseudo-random assignment, we no longer have the simple repeating pattern, and in order to organize your nodes into the vault, you will have to figure out which position your nodes would have to be into pseudo-randomly for them to get into the vault. This makes, of course, it much more difficult and challenging to order your bonds as you would need to, while also preserving, as we mentioned, the distribution of bond across the vaults. And what we're looking for is, of course, a secure seed for this input to this pseudo-random sequence. And we cannot know the seed beforehand, otherwise it's trivial to know what the shuffle will be. But what we are using is we're using data from different places and different times. And so insofar as that the seed cannot be known ahead of time sufficiently to be able to have full knowledge of the seed, then there's only a very low probability that one could ever assume that they would get into the vaults just by guessing what the correct seed would be. And of course, we need to look a little bit more into how we get this, let's say, secure entropy. And we're using the understanding we have of the Tendermint consensus engine and how it works through the Cosmos SDK with the decentralized application built using it. And of course, the state of the machine and this is, let's say, mutating over time. And what we have not only is the state of your decentralized application, which runs on its own channel, but we also have a mutation in the block during the period in which it's being signed off on. And it's important to, I think, understand that when you are building a decentralized application using the Cosmos SDK on the Tendermint BFT consensus engine, your decentralized application runs on its own execution thread. And that means that your definition of your own data model and all the methods that would define changes in that data model for your decentralized application are separate from the Tendermint consensus engine and the blockchain. The Tendermint consensus engine is merely processing and minting blocks, handling, broadcasting, and gossip protocols for the distribution of transactions and blocks for signing, etc. Your decentralized application is merely having events and event handlers called on it by messages broadcast to it essentially from the Tendermint Tendermint consensus engine. So this means that we do not have a single synchronous execution thread within the decentralized application. The state mutates over time, and it mutates over these several general channels. This is not explicit. There is much more detail and complexity to this if you actually get down into it. But if, as we look before on this slide here, we are seeing that we have three primary sources: block hash, block time, and a context available to the decentralized application at the time of the execution of the shuffle method. So where are these coming from? There's the block hash, of course, which is known to the decentralized application at the beginning of the proposal round, let's call it. When the commit method is called from the Tendermint consensus engine to your DApp, then you are able to, at that point in time, know the block hash as the proposer specifically. However, it's important to understand also that there is another aspect of the block known as the block time, and as the block time is determined purely democratically by the Tendermint state machine or the Tendermint consensus engine, then there is no way of knowing exactly what the block time will be as agreed to by the network at the beginning of the proposing of the block for the voting. So every validator posts a time. It's not a measured metric by any other node. The network itself has no consensus on time. This is the way by which the network actually attains consensus on time, and it's merely the fact that you as a validator, when you're signing a block, will post a time along with that, and it could be any time. It's completely arbitrary and up to the validator to post whatever time they want. However, the Tendermint state machine specifically takes into account this method of manipulating block production in order to execute attacks, and implements a guard against manipulation by stipulating that as the block time is going to be the average of the times posted by the validators, those nodes which have posted a time outside of a standard acceptable deviation from the average will be not considered as performance signers and lose benefits and privileges as a result, meaning rewards and loss of revenue. So this elevates the security of the manipulation of the block time to Byzantine fault tolerance levels, which is of course significantly elevated from where the existing vaults are at. And also, within the processing of the signing of the block, the network continues to function. As mentioned, it's not a single-threaded synchronous execution. The Tendermint consensus engine continues handling inbound transactions and continues managing its own state, let's say, as it relates to mempools and the contents of the memory that it's using to manage its methods, its own logic. And it also can, during that time, call events on your state machine, which can, as per the logic in your DApp, cause its own state to change. So while the block is being proposed and signed, both the block is mutating in terms of what its eventual block time will be, as well as the context, or pardon me, the state of the actual DApp channel itself, which is generally stored in the keeper of your decentralized application, that can also mutate. So this is how we're able to assure that at the last point in time, when you have a chance to organize your nodes into the attacking sequence, and the point in time when the shuffle sequence is generated, there is a guarantee that the actual agreed upon state as the consensus of both the Tendermint consensus engine and as your DApp channel, it cannot be known ahead of time. And it's really important, of course, to just keep in mind that if you are organizing an attack and you want to understand what the shuffle sequence will be that will get your nodes into the vault, you need to know the seed that will result in that sequence. And if it is off by even 1 bit, then the entire shuffle is completely different. And all your endeavors to organize your nodes and try and predict what the seed is completely thwarted. This significantly reduces any kind of probability you would have in any way, even attempting to guess what it was that the shuffle sequence would be, and results in a very, very low probability. As an example, for you to know the block hash at the earliest point in time as it relates to what it is that the consensus around the block will be, you need to be the proposer if you want to have any effect on that whatsoever. There is no chance for you to not have any really direct control over what the block hash is unless you are the proposer, which means in order to control that and manipulate that source, you have to be the proposer. And in determining the block time, the only node, since it's a democratic process of the posting of all times by the signers as to what they think the time or what the time is in their own device that they've signed the transaction with, the only node that could actually be able to determine what the block time would be with still having a chance to manipulate it would be the last block signer. So even in just considering those two ways in which you would try to manipulate the seed that would be used in the hash algorithm to determine the shuffle sequence, if it is out, if the block time is out by even 1 second or 1 millisecond, you have the incorrect seed, and as the last signer, you only have a very, very small influence on the total average time. If you're one out of 100 nodes, you have an ability to affect the time by 1% of what you post it to be as whatever deviation from the existing average that it would be, less your signature, to what you would need it to be in order to satisfy the anticipated shuffle sequence it would need to be by having controlled to the millisecond exactly what time it is, which means in order to affect that by 1 millisecond, you have to deviate from the average by 100 milliseconds. And so one of the things about the Thorchain protocol that makes this so exceedingly difficult is that there's a lot of variance in the block time. There will be easily a 2-second range within which you could expect any block to be produced from the existing block, and anywhere from 4 to 6 seconds. And so if the time of the signing has deviated significantly enough from your ability to manipulate it towards the target time, you have completely lost opportunity to even manipulate it towards what you need it to be. So if we were to think of, okay, now you need to control the proposer node and you need to control the last signing node. The rounds of signing are determined pseudo-randomly by the Tendermint consensus engine, and we're already, as an attacker, organizing our nodes as they need to be ordered for bond value. Then you cannot also order them as they would need to be ordered for controlling of which signers at which time you would be on the block itself. So that means you essentially have a random chance according to how many attackers proportional to the number of total nodes that are on the network. So if you say have 10% of the nodes on the network and you need to figure out how often on average are you the block proposer, that's 1 out of 10. And if you also need to therefore be then also the last signer on the block, that is also 1 out of 10. And the times that you would be actually both the block proposer and the last block signer will be 1 in 100 blocks. And since the shuffle method is only called on average expected once every 3 days or 7,000 plus blocks, then you have really only 1 in 300 days chance of even being in the position as validators, as a part of the signing set in the network, to be even able to have a chance to manipulate the block time. And as mentioned, because the block time varies so greatly, and your ability to manipulate it is not sufficient to cover the total range of deviation from the standard target of 5 seconds in the network, you still have very low odds, even out of that 1 in 100 times that you are going to be both the block proposer and the last signer, to even have a chance of manipulating it towards the target time. So this means that you have maybe 1 out of many thousands of times of a chance to be able to manipulate the block time. And if that is on every 3-day cycle, then you were talking about many, many years of continually attempting to get lucky on these probabilities before you could expect to even be able to get in the vaults, just with taking into consideration these two sources of data. And of course, the gap channel state itself can also change during this time. It's important to note that the gap channel state, as well as the state of what Tendermint considers to be the validator set, can change absent of any validator node who's attempting to collude into the vaults can control. You cannot define what other validators are going to do on the network. You cannot specifically predict their performance over any significant amount of time, even in the range of several seconds that we're talking here, for you to be with any certitude at all convinced that you could predict exactly what the seed going into the hash function that would result in the explicit sequence that you needed for you to get your nodes that had been pre-ordered as they would needed to be for your expected shuffle sequence to get into the vaults. So this is why, if you look at the previous video and we were talking about actual probabilities, it starts to range into the number of years before you would be able to get, on average expectations, your colluding cohort of nodes into the vaults. So I hope this has covered a little bit of the more detailed aspects of how it is that we're able to generate a secure pseudo-random shuffle. And I definitely appreciate the time you've taken to go through this with me, and I hope this has helped educate and inform some people as to what I think is breaking down the barrier to understanding that this is a possibility. Many people who are maybe not as aware of how the actual state machine and its execution is happening would maybe think that it's impossible to do this. But I think if you were to take some time and sit down and think through this and how it is working, that as we can see, your attack coordination becomes much more challenging, and your ability to predict the actual seed which goes in to generate the vault sequence becomes an extremely low probability. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have a good day.